Welcome back, CSC 103 class, to 19A, HTML CSS Basics in fall 19. This may change in the spring or another semester, but this is our first kind of HTML CSS exercise that we're working on. So far, we did all our HTML, I believe. And actually, one thing I'll do first, this is even kind of against the directions. I don't have this in the directions, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of this style, this inline style that we put in the H2 tag right away. I'm going to get rid of that. And that'll make that heading go back to being black. And what we're going to do is put it in our CSS. And I'm just going to go up here and I'm going to target the H2 element just like that and put a space and use a curly bracket or a pair of curly brackets, and they'll be side by side, and I'm going to hit enter or return so they go on a separate line, and that's the way CSS will look. We'll have our target element, and then we're going to put any styles here. And if you remember, all that we had was just color. It'll be the same way we did it up there in the HTML. We had color, and we could put red, and then we're going to finish it off with a semicolon. We don't need any quotes or anything here like we had in the HTML. So we're going to do it like that, and that works fine. And you might say, well, why did we do that? Well, now it's easier to find because all our styling, our colors, our formatting is going to be in the CSS, and we don't have to look inside our HTML. Our HTML is pretty much just our content and structure, and that's the way it should be. So any styling is going to be done here. Now, other styling we're going to do, if I look at this, is we're going to style a couple things. One is going to be our paragraph. We're going to also style our photo a little bit, so we're just going to be focusing on the bottom part just to finish off. And you can see just a couple things here: padding, margin. We're even going to give our paragraph an ID so we could target it specially so it's not targeting all the paragraphs. So for example, if I want to target this paragraph down here, it says 150, we're going to make it 170. To target that paragraph, I'm going to go to my HTML, and that bottom paragraph, just so I target this paragraph, I'm going to give it an ID name. Now, there's other ways you could do this with classes and things like that, but we're only doing this one time, so I'm going to give it an ID name. And so I'm going to give it a space and put ID equals, and you could keep the equals together, and you don't have to put ID name, it's just ID, and then in quotes, just like we're doing the other attributes in our HTML, I'm just going to give it a name, and I'm going to call it BTM for bottom. Or you could spell it out BOTTOM, but this will be easier, BTM for bottom. So that's targeting that specific paragraph. That means in my CSS, I could go here and I could target, and I'll put an extra space. I could say P $BTM. Now that's targeting the paragraph with the ID name BTM. Now I could even take out the P if I wanted to, because there's only one ID on that page or in my HTML called BTM, and the £sign indicates that it's an ID. So when you use an ID name, you have to use the £sign to say that's what I'm talking about. So you could either use the P or not use the P. What you can't do is you can't put a space here. If it's P with the ID name of BTM, you have to have them together. You can't have a space there because this means an ID that's inside of all the paragraphs. And we don't have a BTM inside paragraphs. That is the paragraph, if that makes any sense. So use the P right next to it or not at all. So let me just leave it out right now. It might help sometimes if you have the P there just to know that that's a paragraph, because you could have IDs for all kinds of things. So anyway, that's what I'm targeting. So instead of an HTML element, I'm targeting an ID. I'll put a pair of brackets. I'll hit return. And for this paragraph, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to give it a line spacing, and it's called line height in CSS. So I'm going to just type line, and you should see it pop up. And you can use different types of measurement, but we're going to use percentage here. And I don't need a space after the colon. I can put one, but I don't have to have one. So I'll put 170, and I'll put a percent and a semicolon. And there's our spacing. And something else I could do with our paragraph, I'll give it a background color, and I'll do background, and I'll look for color. There's background dash color. That's the attribute. Or the property. In CSS they call them properties. And for color, instead of just guessing on a color, you could go down to assets and go back to colors and just look for a light pastel color. I'll use something like that, and it copies that name, that hex name, to the clipboard. Then when I go here, I could just paste it, and there it is, and that's in hex. And you could look up HTML color names and paste one there if you choose. But I'm going to hit enter and put another style here, and let me close this up so I can see what it looks like. And there you can see the color goes right to the edge of the text, which doesn't look very good. If you're going to use color inside a paragraph, you'd want some space inside here. So what we could use is something called padding. There's two spacing elements, margin and padding, and you'll see what I mean when I put this in here. I'm going to use padding, and if I just use padding, you can use top and left and right and bottom. Even if I go back again and put padding, you could see there's bottom, left, right, and top you could use. If you don't put any, it'll do it all around. So I'm going to use 16 pixels right now because my type by default should be 16 pixels. So I'm just going to use something like that, which should look fine. And there you can see what padding does. It puts padding around the entire paragraph. And remember, our image is inside the paragraph. Just in case it doesn't look like that when you do it, our image, there's a line break which pushes it to a new line so it doesn't try to be on that line, and then the image, and then the closing paragraph tag. So our image is in there, so our padding goes around the entire paragraph. So that's why it's not going around the picture itself. Now if we use something called margin, margin goes outside of the paragraph. So if I did margin, you can see what margin does. It puts space outside, the same amount of space, but it doesn't allow that kind of pinkish color or the mauvish color to be on the inside. So that's why we want padding. And in some cases, we will want to use margin as well. Now, and for example, if we wanted space between this picture and that, we can put a property on the picture, on the image that we have to make some more space. So let's target the image. Now, we can give the image a name, or we could just use image because we only have one image over here. There's no other images. So just for now, we're going to target image. Now, if we had multiple images, this would happen. This would take effect on all images on our page, but right now we only have one image. So we're just going to put something in for image to target the image. And what we're going to do is let's try padding top. And I'll use 16 pixels again. And you can see what that does. It looks good. It puts a little space above there, and that looks nice. So that's kind of what we want. Now I'm also going to put a border on my picture, and I'm going to make it a little smaller. So let me make it a little smaller, and I could just use something called width. It'll do it in proportion. So I'll make it like 300 pixels. That'll change the width of the image. And you can see what that looks like. And that looks nice. And then I'm going to put just a little thin black border on it. When we use border, we have to use three values. We have to use thickness, and these can go in any order, but I'm going to do 1 pix, just a thin border, and a space. You don't use commas, you use spaces down here when you use these three properties. And I'm going to say solid, because it'll be a solid line. And I'm just going to put the color, which is going to be black. And I don't have to put quotes around it or anything like that, as long as it's a standard color. And I'll put my semicolon. And there right away you see a problem because it's wrapping the border around the padding. Because remember, padding is inside the element, margin is outside the element. So to fix that, you would just make sure this is a margin top. And I did that just so you could see the difference between margin and padding. So now the margin is outside the image, still doing the same thing, and the border is wrapping nicely around our image. And if you wanted to change anything about the border, you could change the color, the thickness, and so on. So I'm going to save this if I haven't saved it. And I could take a look at it again. I'll spread it out just to see what it looks like. That's what it looks like so far. I think that's all we have to do on this one. When you're done, you could just share it, and the easiest way to share it is just to go up here to the URL bar and make sure you save it first, and just copy it, Command-C or Control-C. Then go back to your coursework, wherever that is, and I'm not going to do it now, but just make sure that you add comment for that exercise, insert it as a link, and make sure you choose New Window, and that's the way you can submit your assignment. So that's all you have to do for this one.